So I've got quite a lot of material today. I'm not sure that I will be able to cover all of it because I want to give us at least 30 minutes or so for discussion. Any material, I sent you an outline last evening, so any material that I don't get to today, I'll include in my next teaching on May 2nd, when I will be teaching again. So off we go. I'm talking today with you about the extended brain. Schizophrenia is a disease of Western civilization wherein the mind is split between domains of reality. In the case of the brain, researchers tend to split mind-brain as part of this malady that transfuses us. They're just mimicking the meme in which we dwell. Researchers tend to reduce the brain to the skull, though that obviously is a most important locale. It's not the only one. It seems almost impossible for current neuroscience to escape the clutches of reducing the brain to the skull. I say almost impossible. Return to my story of treating people who are labeled by our culture as schizophrenics. Note the power of the image of the roots of a plant draped over my head as I'm treating a person who has managed to be labeled in this way. It was a powerful, powerful moment in redirecting my life and the direction of my work as a psychologist and a psychotherapist. I'm holding up now a plant, and I'm going to put it right over here so I can mimic the experience. You can see it. This particular plant is various places on the land that Judith and I share with various creatures and other aspects of the Ecofield. But this is actually the purification plant that Mahatma Gandhi used in the garden where he meditated for several weeks before he committed to any kind of action. In some ways, you might say this plant or its predecessors helped produce and liberate India through the salt march that followed his deep purification with that plant. A central question arises with this image that you see with this plant and also the one of a plant wrapping itself around my skull. How does the brain in the skull relate to the extended brain of the plant as a representative of the local ecofield? To address that question, at least in a beginning way, I invite us to explore informational impulses from the matrix of fields in the form of neural system maps provided by a new breed of neuroscientists. These maps suggest a circular relationship between mind-brain, one that extends beyond us humans. The maps I present in this lecture are not exhaustive but suggestive since we are at the very beginning, I say, of a scientific revolution and exploration of Earth's nervous system. Earth's nervous system is a term that I use and I have borrowed from some of these newer researchers. These mind-brain studies, and especially the extended brain studies, are one of the most important energetic impulses of a shift which may give us a new civilization. Hopefully so. Let's begin with Ken Wilber's quadrants. Last week, Jim mentioned the quadrants, and they are a major advance in our understanding reality. You'll recall in the quadrants, the upper left is the I, or the interior of the individual. The lower left is the we, or the communal or tribal interior that we have shared together. The upper right, the me, in terms of our study, is the neuroscience of the brain that exists within the skull. And this is very, very important for us to understand. And I'm happy that Jim Hickman is with us, because he is a very able guide for us to sojourn within our own skulls. The lower right is the its of the extended brain, or the exterior me, its. And what I want to point out about Wilber's quadrants at this point is that it's a limited map. Limited in the sense that I'm discussing today the lower right quadrant in the extended brain includes the other three quadrants. That is, the extended brain of Gaia, indeed of the universe itself, includes our group, our tribal, our communal brain, commonly called group dynamics. It includes the interior of our own explorations, where those of us, most of all of us, are cultural creatives, and we're most at home with this upper left eye that is looking inside ourselves. But it also includes, does the Gaia brain, the me, or the brain that is within our skull. So now we're off to explore the matrix, the teeming matrix of research that's telling us that the brain that we have, that we generally think of as our brain or as my brain, is really our brain, and not just the human brain, but the brain of Earth herself, and indeed the universe itself. Einstein opens the door to an extended brain. Some of you are in the Great Books course, and I'll be lecturing on that tomorrow. As a child, Einstein spoke the mother tongue, and it was interpreted by his family and by his culture as, quote, garbled. That is, he spoke a language that they did not understand. As an adult, Einstein engaged in brain exchanges with the gravitational and electromagnetic fields that continued, and even to this day, to baffle historians of science. His theory of relativity and gravity opened the door for a, quote, neural exchange of information in the space-time fabric. Next, consider general systems theory and cybernetic theory as a way to describe the extended brain. One of my heroes, Gregory Bateson, wrote the seminal book entitled Mind and Nature, A Necessary Unity. Here is Bateson's astounding thesis, quote, insofar as we humans are a mental process, to that same extent, we must expect the natural world to show similar characteristics of mentality, end quote. Or, as I might put it, insofar as we are a mind-brain coagulation, to that same extent, we must expect the natural world to show similar characteristics of a mind-brain coagulation. Neuroscientist Umberto Mascherano is particularly known for creating the term autopoiesis, which describes the nature of reflexive feedback mechanisms in living systems. His work has been influential in many fields, but mainly the field of systems thinking and cybernetics. Overall, his work is concerned with the biology of cognition, or, as he once said in a seminar in Houston, every system, especially family systems, display a form of systemic cognition. Let me repeat that statement. Systems display cognition, or as one of his researchers put it, organizations have a systemic brain, not just a mind, but a hardwired brain. Next, consider the Gaia brain as our brain. With the great female researcher Lynn Margulis and James Lovelock as the chief researchers, and by the way, I believe James Lovelock has gotten credit for a lot of Dr. Margulis's research. The Gaia Hypothesis, say these two, posits that the Earth is a self-regulating complex system involving the biosphere, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and the pedosphere, tightly coupled as an evolving system in which there is a constant exchange of information. By the way, if you don't know what a pedosphere is, it's soil. The hypothesis contends that this system as a whole, which Lynn called Gaia, seeks a physical and chemical environment optimal for our contemporary life. Gaia evolves through a cybernetic feedback system operated somewhat unconsciously through the biota, leading to broad stabilization of the conditions of habitability that approaches but never quite achieves homeostasis. That's a very important point. Einstein wanted the universe to have complete equilibrium, but quantum physics has given us a universe that never quite achieves homeostasis. Many processes in the Earth's surface essential for the conditions of life depend on the interaction of living forms, especially microorganisms with inorganic elements. These processes in the Gaia theory establish a global systemic control system that regulates Earth's surface temperatures, the atmosphere composition, and ocean salinity. All of this is powered by a global thermodynamic disequilibrium within the system. See, I think that's an important point, that a part of what powers our brains and powers the brain of Gaia is a sense of disturbance as well as comfort. In short, Gaia is thinking by utilizing her brain, of which our own neural systems are a tiny, tiny aspect. In the Gaia theory, for humans to think that their own brains are the main brains is quite preposterous. In this theory, the physical manifestation of Gaia is a neural system. We'll come back to that shortly. The next aspect of the matrix, this teeming matrix of research showing us the possibility of a global neural system, are psychological systems extended into family neural systems through, surprise, surprise, ceremony. In my early book, The Many-Colored Buffalo, Transformation Through the Council of Voices, I propose that our inner world is composed of a system of voices, an interior family of cells, an inner ecofield. The selves, spelled S-E-L-V-E-S, function somewhat like the neurobiology of cells, C-E-L-L-S. At least for me, the writing of this book opens the door to journey from selves to cells through psychotherapy, but more particularly through earth-based ceremony. Ceremony in this context becomes both a tuning into and a manifestation of the neural system of Earth. Ceremony becomes the neural firing of Gaia herself. Ceremonial selves, S-E-L-V-E-S, and cells, C-E-L-L-S, fire together and wire together. Now I want to pause here for just a moment because these are pretty substantial manifestations of Earth's neural system. I want to pause by and throw in a free marketplace proposal of a larger nervous system. It's called CENSE, or Central Nervous System of Earth. Does that sound like a metaphysical statement? Yes, but strange as it may seem, that is the phrase that describes an entrepreneurial project by Hewlett-Packard. The Central Nervous System of Earth is a project of Hewlett-Packard to place sensors all around the Earth. The idea is that sensors will transmit data at the speed of light. It's kind of fast. If an earthquake was to have its epicenter 20 miles away, you could know about it 10 seconds before you felt the ground shake. I'm not sure exactly how that'll help, but that's the promise. The promise behind one of their newest products coming out of the Hewlett-Packard labs. Let me go into it a little bit more. They plan to install 1 trillion tiny sensors to collect data about the world around us. They're trying to build a central, in their words, a central nervous system for the Earth. This is an interesting notion, but it seems to me another indication of the pride and also ignorance of modern people with regard to nature that is not controlled by humans. Some people view the internet as an extended brain, but I want to stay in this lecture today with the notion of humans having only a very small, but perhaps significant role as being manifestations of Earth's brain system. I offer this, quote, business development to show that there are convergent lines of evidence for a brain system within Earth beyond what we would usually conceive in our common sense. Okay, so that's just an interlude, a kind of a recess in the morning's class. Next, I want to talk about Candace Pert, who extends the neural system to include all of the cells of our body. I'm going to talk about this in great detail on May the 2nd, but I want to introduce this piece of it right now. As a mere graduate student in 1972, Candace Pert discovered the brain's opiate receptors, you will recall. That is, the cellular sites where the body's painkillers and bliss makers, as she put it, the endorphins, bond with cells to weave their magic within our neural system. But not just in our skulls. Pert's discovery led to a revolution in neuroscience, helping to open the door to a, quote, information-based model of the brain, which is now, in my view, replacing the old structuralist model that divides the brain into different structures that can be controlled through various stimulants. She says the structuralist model of the brain has very limited use in future consideration. As a groundbreaking neuroscientist, Pert's research helped to create the foundation for an entirely new interdisciplinary branch of science called, now hold on to your seat on this one, psychoneuroimmunology, or PNI. PNI unites the three classically separated sciences of neuroscience, immunology, and endocrinology, and their associated glands and organs into a multi-directional communicational neural network linked by information-carrying molecules called neuropeptides. Pert provided PNI with a clear array of scientific language to open the door to considering peptides and the receptors as informational substances. I want to say that again. She introduced the research that within our cellular system, we're constantly communicating with our 13 trillion cells at every given moment. So in that sense, she says, all cells are neural. So here we have a woman, sometimes described as a representative of the divine feminine, courageously proposing that every cell is actually involved in cognition. Now, I'm aware that with Dr. Pert, we are integrating neural domains so that the traditional me skull neuroscience loses some of its territory and definition. There is always something of a loss when there is a loosening of boundaries between models and research areas. Still, an extended brain not only seems worthwhile, but entirely reflective of reality. Plus, a model of the brain as extended seems to be emerging at the edge of neuroscientific inquiry, though much of the material you'll read is largely ignorant or at least not informed of this research. Next, I want to take a big leap. I introduced in our last session the entangled brain of the brilliant May-Wan Ho. Now, I want to pause here and note that Candace Pert, in several of her writings, pointed out that the lead researcher, who was a man, in some ways co-opted her research and received the Nobel Prize. This is a common difficulty we have right now with brain research, because most of the research is male dominated. And when we get these brilliant scientists like May-Wan Ho, Candace Pert, and Lynn Margulis, all of whom women, are introducing actually a more feminine view of the brain that is not so structured, but more fluid, more alive, more colorful than we can imagine. I have an occasional communication on my screen that tells me that I'm unstable. And I think maybe that might be true. So here are a few quotes. I'm going to quote May-Wan Ho for a few moments. She defined herself, as I said last week, as a quantum jazz neuroscientist. Right away, you see, she's escaping the usual. Quote, "Science is a quest for the most intimate, connected understanding of nature. It is not an industry set up for the purpose of validating existing theories and indoctrinating students in the correct ideology. She goes on to say, you may think I have been using the word consciousness rather loosely, referring to the embryo. Whenever people speak of consciousness, they usually locate it in the skull brain, where ideas and intentions are supposed to emanate, and which, through the nervous system, is supposed to control the entire body. She goes on, I have always found that odd, for like all Chinese, I was brought up on the idea that thoughts, like feelings, originate in the heart. You see, it may take feminine researchers to lead us out of our restrictions. I have come to the conclusion, says she, that a more accurate account is that our consciousness is delocalized throughout the liquid crystalline continuum of the body, including what we usually call the brain. That's true because usually we localize the brain in the skull or even in the heart. But by consciousness, I include at the minimum the faculties of sentience, responsiveness, and intercommunication, as well as memory being present in all the cells of the body. See, she's speaking as a biophysicist, so she has a very different view than neuropsychologists and neurobiologists. She goes on to say, the connective tissues of the body are also liquid crystalline and rest frozen or well-fixed sections of the skin, cartilage, and tendons. And they exhibit the same brilliant interference colors typical of all living organisms. Now I want to get to the heart of her research. We discovered an imaging technique in my laboratory that made all organisms look like liquid crystal displays. We put little organisms together under a microscope, and the kind of microscope that we invented was the polarizing light microscope. We borrowed this from earth scientists who used a similar microscope to look at rock crystals. This polarizing light microscope has two crossed polarizers, so the field is completely dark as no light can get through, unless you have these rock crystals that are birefringent, that have a particular kind of crystalline order that changes the direction of light, so they appear bright and colorful. Now, I want to come back to this term birefringence because I had no idea what it was. Birefringence is the optical property of a material having a refractive index that depends on the polarization and propagation direction of light. I'm going to show you a picture in a moment that'll make this clear. These crystals have a specific atomic and subatomic order. Liquid crystals do the same. They are also birefringent. They have a special molecular alignment and can appear bright and colorful, but you need a specific setting of the microscope to bring that out, as the birefringence of liquid crystals is weaker than rock crystals. However, in a living organism, there is nothing static, and that was what puzzled us. How can organisms look like liquid crystal displays? They're moving all around are these organisms. So there can't be any static molecular order to give the brilliant colors. That's why I call my book The Rainbow and the Worm, the Physics of Organism. The worm doesn't really refer to a worm. It was a Drosophila larva, a little fruit fly that hatches out of an egg. And when we made this amazing discovery, which gave me one of the most powerful aesthetic experiences I had in my entire life, I was actually looking for something else. I was looking for molecular order in the egg that is more subtle. That was what we were looking for. And we did find it, but it was nowhere near as exciting as the moving organism appearing like a liquid crystal, a rainbow. Now, I want to show you some pictures here. So what you're looking at now is pictures on the cover of her book. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pictures. These are all living organisms. According to Mei-Wan Ho, you might be looking at your own brain if you were looking through this particular microscope. She said that when she first saw these rainbow pictures of our neural system, it changed her life. And she began painting for the first time. I think you're looking now at Mei-Wan Ho, and off to her right, you will see the painting, which is her inner experience of the exterior neural rainbow brain. I actually feel a little teary when I see this. When I think that all of us, instead of having gray matter, and I'll get to that in a minute, we have rainbow brains. So the explanation is that all the molecules are moving coherently together, and the molecular motions are slower than the vibrations of light, so that at every instant the light senses the molecular order and therefore gives you this liquid crystal display. That really is the best evidence of the molecular coherence that exists in not only in the whole organism, but in all organisms. The water associated with living organisms, some 70% by weight and 99% by count of molecules, is most important in this respect because the water, listen to this, the water is responsible for the liquid crystallinity and also the flexibility of the proteins and other macromolecules so they can all move coherently and cogently together. She's speaking again. I use the analogy of quantum jazz to express the quantum coherence of the organism. It goes through a fantastic range of space and time scales, from the tiniest atom or subatomic particle to the whole organism, and beyond to the extended universe. Organisms communicate with other organisms and are attuned to natural rhythms so that they have circadian rhythms, annual rhythms, and so on. Yes, I use the imagery of quantum jazz to put it across. Imagine for a moment a huge jazz band of musicians making music, from very small instruments to the very large, playing very fast, so to very slow, with a musical range of 70 octaves. They are improvising from moment to moment, spontaneously and freely, and yet keeping in tune and in step with the whole. That is quantum coherence. As I was reading this, I said to myself, what is coherence of this sort but the neural system of Gaia at work? She goes on to say you can have lower degrees of coherence, the workaday coherence that keeps life ticking. If you have a fully quantum coherent system, listen to this. According to my research, she's speaking again, you will never age and you will never die. But alas, we do age, we do die. That's because of incoherence of varying degrees. In The Rainbow and the Worm, I suggest that time itself is an accumulation of incoherence. Western education tends to divide you up. Do you want to be divided up? It divides you into the observer and the observed, the controller and the controlled, and God knows what else. Life just isn't like that. Life is spontaneous and free, and everything works by intercommunication. It's a perfect social anarchy because each player is as much in control as he or she is sensitive and responsive. And that's the ideal of the happy person. That's the ideal of the healthy person. And when you've got a group of people playing music together and they get into a coherent state, it's so beautiful. It's just the most beautiful thing. You can feel it in the audience. I'm not a musician, but I can feel how sublimely happy the musicians are when they are in that state. This is Will speaking. As an aside, it's well noted that people singing in a choir will sometimes have their heartbeats get into sync in much the same way that college women in dormitories sometimes have the same menstrual cycle. So then Maywan Ho goes on to consider Buckminster Fuller, and his neural brain of tensegrity. Tensegrity, the tensional integrity or floating compression, is a structure principle based on the use of isolated components in compression inside a net of continuing tension in such a way that the compressed members do not touch each other, and the pressed tensioned members, usually cables or tendon, delineate the system spatially. She's stating that the nervous system of a human is roughly like the structure you see in a moment on screen, including all cells, bones, skin, organs, subatomic particles, and light. But the difference is the role of water as the medium of the electromagnetic field moving through the neural cells. Is she saying that Gaia has a nervous system that might look a little like this photo? So this is very interesting that Maywan Ho saw within this model what the neural system of Earth might look like. It's also what our neural system might look like. Next, I want to consider David Bohm's extended brain as holo movement. I know I'm giving you a lot here, so be patient with me, and we'll consider this. Bohm first called the attention of the scientific world to what he called hidden variables underneath the current views of our world. When he probed the quantum world, he kept discovering hidden variables that took him ever deeper. It is apparent that his term, quote, hidden variables, refers not only to an inherent intelligence and consciousness, but to a very explicit nervous system within the very fabric of the quantum field. His work links quantum fields with an extended nervous system. Here is one of his famous experiments that explores such a proposal. He set up a lab where he researched electrons in plasma Plasma, as you recall, is one of the four states of matter, the others being solids, liquids, and gas. Plasma is the most common state of matter in the universe, so it commanded his attention. You may not know this, but the sun and all the stars are made principally of plasma. Matter in the plasma state has variable volume and shape. You and I know about practical plasma in televisions and fluorescent lights. As well as neutral atoms, it contains a significant number of ions and electrons that move around freely. So Bohm placed plasma in a lab container. Then he observed how electrons behaved in the plasma. To his great surprise, the electrons stopped behaving like individuals and started behaving as if they were part of a larger and interconnected whole. Excited, he told his colleagues that the electrons were, in some sense, not only alive, not only sensitive, but remarkably communicating with each other. They behaved like a flock of geese flying in formation. That was a constant movement in the midst of chaos that yielded emergent coherence. David Bohm was astonished. These electrons in his experiment were exhibiting some form of consciousness, not like ours, but consciousness nonetheless. Were the electrons, I asked the question, behaving as part of Earth's nervous system, an expression of the extended brain? It appears so. Here is a second experiment. Bohm set up a large glass container that appeared like a large salad spinner. You know, when you put lettuce in your salad and spin it around. Then he filled the spinner with glycerin, a highly viscous fluid. Next, he took an eyedropper and squeezed a large drop of ink into the container. After that, he turned the apparatus in one direction, and the droplet drew out into a long thread that eventually became so thin that, voila, it disappeared. No trace. Then the hidden variables of a hidden nervous system go to work. Bohm turned the cylinder in the opposite direction. The thread form of ink began to reappear and transform itself into a droplet. But here's the catch in the experiment. The droplet that appeared within the vat of glycerin was not the same droplet. The motion of the cylinder pulled particles and molecules together into a new droplet, much like, but still very different from the original one. The particles and molecules of the old droplet came together to form a new one. Created how? Out of the reverse spin of the cylinder. My goodness! Bohm exclaimed. The experiment had revealed the possibility of a deep order underneath the chaos of the spin. Yes, the drop disappeared just as the first and second laws of thermodynamics predicted. But then the hidden variable of a different turning of the spin of the cylinder revealed the possibility of a hidden order, even, he said, of an intelligence that, given the right circumstances, could lead to a new coherence, a new creation, a new drop. Bottom line, if you tunnel enough into the universe, you will discover what Bohm called an implicate order. You would discover, if you go deep enough into the universe, what he called holo movement, a movement within the universe that tends to create new forms. Perhaps it is the holo movement itself that is an important dimension of Gaia's mind-brain. Or as Bohm's colleague Ilya Prigogine put it when he received the Nobel Prize in 1977, out of the sea of chaos rise islands of coherence. Now I want to talk just a couple of minutes about gray matter, dark matter, and dark energy. Are we talking about the nervous system of the universe when we use the term dark matter? You and I have gray matter here in our skulls. The universe has dark matter and dark energy. Are both expressions of the mind-brain? The visible universe, including the Earth, the sun, stars, galaxies, and by the way, our own brains, made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons bundled together into atoms. Perhaps one of the most surprising discoveries of the 20th centuries was that ordinary matter makes up only 5% of the mass of the universe. It follows that gray and white matter of our brains make up less than 5% of our brains. 99% of neuroscience is concerned with 5% of our brains, according to May Wan Ho. The rest of the universe, including our brains, appears to be made up of mysterious, invisible substances called dark matter, and a force that repels gravity itself, known as dark energy. One leading hypothesis is that dark matter consists of exotic particles that don't interact with normal matter or even light, but that still exert a gravitational pull. In my next lecture on May 2nd, I'll explore how these exotic particles use microtubules to connect with and resonate with the larger nervous system of our universe. For now, though, stay with this one point. Dark energy is even more mysterious, and its discovery in the 1990s was a complete shock to scientists. Previously, physicists had assumed that the attractive force of gravity would slow down the expansion of the universe over time. You remember that idea. But when two independent teams tried to measure the rate of deceleration, they found that the expansion, to their great surprise and to ours, was actually speeding up. One scientist likened it to throwing up a set of keys in the air, expecting them to fall back down, only to see them fly straight up toward the ceiling. Scientists now think that the accelerated expansion of the universe is driven by this repulsive force generated by quantum fluctuations in what was previously thought to be, quote, empty space. What's more, the force seems to be growing stronger as the universe expands. For lack of a better name, scientists call this force dark energy. According to one idea, dark energy is a fifth and previously unknown type of fundamental force called quintessence, which fills the universe like a fluid. As an aside, it must be said that Einstein's remark concerning Buddha's intuition about an empty universe now appears to be wrong, or at least half wrong. Keep in mind that Einstein died long before dark matter and dark energy were discovered. Many scientists also have pointed out that the known properties are dark energy and consistent with a cosmological constant, a mathematical band-aid that Einstein added to his theory of general relativity to make his equations fit with the notion of a static universe. Now that we see that the expansion of the universe is accelerating, adding in dark energy as a cosmological constant could neatly explain how space-time is being stretched apart. But that explanation still leaves scientists clueless as to why this strange force exists in the first place. In any case, we now have to consider that our mind brains consist not only of observable gray and white matter, tofu, as Jim called it quite descriptively, but also interactive, invisible, dark matter, and dark energy. Brain tissue is made up of cell bodies, gray matters, and the filaments that extend from the cell bodies, called white matter. But the more significant power of our brains may be the quintessence force that interacts naturally with our environment. And this is what I call the extended brain. And now, a few concluding remarks and transition to discussion and my next lecture. Let me review. Ken Wilber gave us the quadrants. Few researchers have noticed that the nervous system of the Earth is both the lower right quadrant, but also includes the other three domains. Einstein opened the door to a view of the universe, where the universe is alive and exchanging information in the space-time continuum. And then we come to what I call the holy trinity of neuroscientific women: Lynn Margulis, Candace Pert, and May Wan Ho. Lynn Margulis showed us the Gaia Brain, which she says consists of the nervous system, of which includes the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, the biosphere, and the pedosphere. Candace Pert showed us that all the cells of our body are thinking and talking with each other in a communal way. May Wan Ho showed us through her polarizing microscope, the moving organism appears like dynamic liquid crystal, a rainbow. Our brains, she says, are like a jazz ensemble in sound and a rainbow to the eye. Bucky Fuller gave us the notion of tensegrity, and May Wan Ho states that the Earth brain functions like structural tensegrity. And finally, Einstein's spiritual son, David Bohm, gave us the proposal that the universe itself has a massive neural system characterized by hollow movement between the implicate and explicate orders. A final word about consciousness in the brain. It is common to confuse mind with consciousness and to say that the brain is one thing and consciousness another. In my view, consciousness includes the circuity of mind-brain spirals. The material brain and the non-material mind are included within the rainbow of consciousness. And we are all hardwired and filled with an operating system whose central function is to connect us with and resonate with the larger mind brain that we can call the conscious and living universe. So that leaves us about 30 minutes to talk about all of this. Let's begin our conversation with any comments that you have, and I got some beautiful emails about experiences that some of you have had recently with the neural system of our ecofields. So we can start with some of those. I heard from Constantina and Shauna and Emma and Sarah and Rod and Alice and Shannon. So do any of you want to share any of your experiences?
Sure, I'm on.
Okay, who are you?
This is Alice.
Okay,
This
good.
is Alice.
Okay, Alice.
Okay. Well, blessings from Alice in Tampa, Florida. From my window of my condo on the 18th floor, I have an unobstructed view of the Bay of Tampa. I see the seawall, which is described as the longest seawall in the country, if not the world. I have only to look out at the saltwater ocean bay and all its tidal activity, and also most of the downtown Tampa. Depending upon the season and the time of day, from my window, I see huge pelicans in formation, circling and diving quickly for breakfast or dinner. They often fly as high as my building. Seagulls fly lower over the water, often in groups, but also alone. The bay is also feeding ground for dolphins and also sharks. Dolphins usually travel together. They have been known to round up their fish dinner and move them into shallower areas for their feast. Many different kinds of fish and sea life provide food in this balanced ecosystem. Birds stop to rest, nest in trees along the traffic divide or in people's yards along the way. People also enjoy the seawall. From early morning until late at night, people of all ages walk, run, bicycle along the very long wall sidewalk. Other animals of the sea and land are often captured and reported as out of place. No one wants crocodiles in their backyard. That's the end. Thank you.
Oh, good, and thank you so much. That's a beautiful description. And you know, it's not that I wouldn't see some of those experiences when I look at a bay, but what's different for me as you read is thinking about the intertwining of a neural system and a human system with the bay. So thank you for that. So someone else sharing. Thank you, Alice. As my mother used to say when I was a boy, don't make me call on you. So let me call on you then. Constantina, speak to us about crawdads.
Well, yesterday I had a really wonderful time just exploring my Ecofield here in Ohio. And I live on about 54 acres of farmland and forest. And this time of year, the crawdads are extremely active. And you'll see their little crawdad chimneys with a hole in the center, particularly surrounding the pond that I have here, one of them. And the amazing thing about the crawdads is that they are kind of, we might consider them the garbage collectors of the soil. And they break down the leaves, the stems, microorganisms, and basically keep our earth from having tons and tons of piles of organic matter left unbroken down. So you wouldn't think these little things would do that. Some people call them crayfish. Here in Ohio, we call them crawdads. But they form intricate burrows underground, and their intelligence actually is pretty unique. So that was my little contribution regarding my Ecofield, and I was just astounded by how they interact with the basically the heartbeat of Gaia to keep our Earth really well maintained. One of many organisms that do that.
Right. Thank you so much, Constantina. And as we look more explicitly on May 2nd at definitions of ecofields, you can see right away that what you're describing is a very intricate set of communications happening many times faster than the speed of light in that particular. Now, was that in your backyard?
Well, yeah, I guess you would call it my backyard. I'm in the country.
Yeah.
So kind of like you are. So it just kind of is just right out there. As you walk out there, the pond is maybe 300 feet from the house.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, and then also, Shauna, I'd like to hear what you had to say about your experience with ants.
Well, I'm just going to read what I wrote you.
Okay, good.
So after a long weekend of ceremony, I went into the woods to look for an example of an expanded neural system in nature. As I sat down on a rock, a big black carpenter ant walked over my foot. This creature started to walk in semicircles, combing its environment and intimately interacting with the earth and all her forms with its feelers. At one point, it joined 3 other ants, and they stopped as if having a conversation with each other. And sharing the findings from their journey, they made the decision to walk towards a hollow cedar tree that had been ravaged by a woodpecker. A red ant came along, and it was moving faster and more frantic than the larger ants. I watched the differences between how these 2 species of ants related with environment and each other. Overall, it seemed that both types of ants are similar to the human neural system. They receive information from the environment and relay it back to each other, the main colony, the executive functioning. Our central nervous system sends signals to our neurons, and depending on the signal and the requirement for action, the neurons will release neurotransmitters to create an effective response. If the ants find food or worthy material for the colony, the specific communication will go back to the colony, and the neurotransmitters are released, and the ants will selectively respond to the signal given. Like the neural system, each ant brings a bit of information, and they move this information around to function effectively. Ants come together and work as a whole system, interfacing with the world, as does the human neural system. Again, like the neural system, the ants are continuously moving signals all day long. On my vision quest, the ants were an intimate part of my journey. I have deep respect for how hard the ants work and how our bodies and our neural system continuously function for us. I have deep gratitude for the miracle of life, our body and its neural system, and for the ants and the uniqueness and similarities of all nature and our intimate communication with the ecofields.
Wow, thank you so much. You know, what I really like about your experience is how you have this experience and then you're reflecting on it from looking through the lens of a neural system view of it. I mean, you could look at this in many different ways. You could look at it spiritually, you could look at it poetically, you could look at it artistically, the way Mei Wan Ho did when she first saw the rainbow within the cellular structure of the larva. But another way to do it and this is really helpful to me, is to begin to think about this ecofield that you were immersed in and you were part of it, as actually thinking. See that? I don't know about you folks, but that's a big stretch for me on an experiential level to say, wow, I am a part of the thought of this field. And it is thinking me. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thanks for bringing the vision quest into that. And then let's see, yeah, Emma, I don't know if you're on here or not. Let's see. Yeah, there you are. I think I saw you.
Okay. Yes. Hi, everyone.
I liked what you had to say about trees, the poplar trees.
I'm going to segue into that with your last statement, Bill. I am a part of the thought of this field, and that's exactly what I very much appreciated as I was standing there amongst the poplar trees, in this case on Cape Cod, which is near Boston. And so we're by the sea, and for those who are not familiar with poplar trees, they have a wonderful rustling in the breeze. They kind of are going like this in the breeze instead of a regular flowing, and it's an incredible sound that they make. So that in itself on this level is wonderful. But as I wrote, I stood out there very open to messages and to receiving from those wonderful beings. which I did. And again, for me, that's so always, I am always in gratitude when I do experience something like that. And I was trying to absolutely take in the good of that for at least the 30 seconds, if you will. So that's part of my practice at this point. But to absolutely understand and know on a deep level that I, in that case, and we, can be part of the thought and the consciousness of other consciousness, it is just an incredible feeling that we're all connected, if you will. So that was the most important piece for me yesterday.
Yes, thank you for that. And that's a very important thing. And I think especially it was a grove of poplar trees, right?
Yes.
And when you get those groves, there is this, at least for 30 seconds, can be into a transordinary state of consciousness.
Yes.
Where suddenly you're not thinking like a tree, you're being a part of the thought of the intertwining of the trees, and you become a part of that.
Yes. Another transcendental, if we can call them that, experiences that I've had and that others of you have had. Yes, it's very much the connection that it's not myself and the other being. It very much is that connection. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Emma. Now, where are you calling from?
Right now I'm in New Hampshire.
New Hampshire.
But where those wonderful poplar trees are, our home is on Cape Cod, which is outside of Boston, Massachusetts.
Yeah, good. Good, okay, good. So I want to shift now to Sarah Whiteley from the United Kingdom, because I want to hear something about water.
So I'm going to read what I wrote as well, if that's okay.
Sure.
So, given the extended brain invitation, I left a window open overnight last night. Living in the 4th floor loft of a cliff-top home by the North Sea, the cold wind is only just beginning to temper towards springtime. Not every night can the sea be heard, even though some 100 meters from my home. But this night, the sea was speaking, and loudly. Having a close affinity and proximity with water, I took the invitation as opening the windows of my consciousness to this elemental expanse and listened. I woke at 4 a.m., wide awake, and recorded the roar of the waves, the sound of a solo singing bird, earliest riser of the dawn chorus, and the wind glancing the microphone from time to time. It was magical and potent, and I'd like to see whether you can hear it.
Mm-hmm. We can hear it.
The coastal night was alive.
Yeah.
Sea, winged ones were sending vibrational and physical waves skyward, landward, hitting shorelines, piercing edges, colliding pier walls, churning sand and stone, penetrating eardrums. A wild and glorious symphony of water, wind, and song. It awakened my heart. That post-recording drew me under and into the dream time, presenting strong images of deep preparation, discernment, the need for right timing and letting go, for support and travel, and death occurring 5 times. a dream so potent that I voluntarily woke myself from the chaos and then returned to the unfolding narrative that continued with images of needing to track, decipher, and consider. Finally, the dream suggested its messages had been memorized and written for waking use. And yet on waking, I understood it was still in recall memory and hadn't been written yet. Clear as day, I wrote the multiple layers down. The invitation extended my awareness, and I suspect my experimentation for tuning into the bigger waves of the dream time within a wider landscape. Phew, what a download. The bird singer offered piercing precision and punctuation, a showing up ahead of the wave, whilst the sea roared its message at depth, hitting hard against the edges with power and clarity. The wind glanced and swirled all around. All and more being co-inspirers and dream partners, inviting descent and discovery of information into awakening for onward travel.
Thank you. I love the way you intertwine the water of consciousness as a dream image with the water that's near your sleeping place. It brings to my mind an observation that May Wan Ho made about water. Two things. The difference between her research between the rock crystals and the cellular cells of living organisms was water as the medium of electricity, of the electromagnetic field. And then another observation she made about water is that if you take water like I have here in this coffee cup, it's 40% coherent. But the water that's in your body, as I said at our last week, is 100% coherent. So something about the communication of our cells actually brings water into coherence in the same way that it brings us into coherence. So there's this beautiful dance between our bodies and water that is a communication that not only improves us, it improves water. So thank you for sharing that. So now let me open the floor to anybody for sharing any kind of neural experience or comments about what I had to say, or questions or whatever, or any comments to say with Jim Hickman. Jim's here with us.
I'd like to give a little context for this story. My wife Sheila and I live here in the Texas Hill Country along the Blanco River, and in a few weeks we'll be at the 1-year anniversary of the Blanco River having exceeded its banks by over 50 feet. At that time we were flooded out of our home, and we're back in that home that we were living in when the flood came. So Sheila and I have a practice of each morning. Often we do it independent of one another. Sometimes we do it together, but we go each morning down to the river and we say prayers, and we pray in a medicine wheel, praying to each of the directions. And there are 2 Egyptian geese. These Egyptian geese, Sheila calls them ducks, I call them geese. It turns out they're a cross between a duck and a goose. Very colorful and very expressive. Like the females have quite the voice and the males are silent, which is, I don't know, that's kind of interesting to me. But each day when we go down at different times, and so it's not the same schedule every week or every day, but we'll be saying our prayers, and sometime during the prayers, one or both of the geese will show up. And so for me, sometimes I'll have my eyes closed and I'll feel the presence of the geese, the goose, and I'll look down, and sure enough, it'll be a foot from me, just standing there with me. I'll be saying my prayers. It'll be looking in the same direction I'm looking, and when I open my eyes, it'll usually honk at me or make some sound or something. Now, I will say that I do feed the geese, and so that's one of the reasons they may show up. But they show up at we're there at different times, and not all the time do I feed them. So anyway, it's just interesting, that interaction between these geese and the prayers each day. And I see the geese around town, different creeks that I can see from town. They're these same geese. I think it's the same geese. And and those may be a mile away from our house. So they may have quite a ways to travel to come visit me.
So while you're talking there, translate that experience over into, is this something of a new thought for you to think of that as a neural exchange?
Yes. Yeah, it is. So as we were talking today and last week, just the notion that there's some communication, I believe, that occurs between the geese and us for them to know that we're there, and for them to participate in our prayers in that way. Another thing that they do is they stand on one leg. And so in our yoga practice, we often stand on one leg. So when they're standing on one leg, I stand on one leg. And then they switch legs, so I'll switch legs with them. And I'm not sure who's training who, but we have that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, Dan. And really, this is what I want us to explore, not to accept as a belief, but to see if it resonates. Is that subfield of systemic environment that you're in with the geese, is there actual thinking going on there? That's the hypothesis for us to test out with our experience. What does it feel like? It's not going to resonate on a rational basis, but on an experiential level, does it feel like a thought? That's the question I want us to continue to work with. So Shannon, you had a wonderful piece to share too about flowers and bees and spiders.
Well, I'll read you what I wrote. Spring is such a perfect season to witness and experience coherence, especially when plants are flowering. Bees and other insects, such as butterflies and beetles, emerge at just the right time to gather nectar and to help pollinate the plants, which then develop fruit or seeds that other species of animals eat. Not only that, but some of the insects may be sources of food for other species, such as migrating songbirds. Just the other day, with the bees so active along the river, I watched as fuzzy jumping spiders lurked in tall grass along the banks, waiting for an unsuspecting bee to land nearby and become lunch. In fact, I saw one large spider snatch a bee from the clutches of a much smaller spider. The immediate consequence of that swift action was very comical, as the smaller spider, so forcefully robbed of its prize, was dramatically launched from the blade of grass, then fell through the air, landing safely on the ground below. In my surprise and utter delight, I laughed out loud, no doubt causing many neurons to fire together and flooding my brain with dopamine, eliciting an intense feeling of happiness. It's not simply a matter of chance that these processes coincide and these relationships exist, but rather a beautiful and complex orchestration of interdependencies and more, a vast coordination of many forms of awareness, perception, and intelligence. It very much illustrates interrelationship and interbeing. And I am a participant in this story. All of the participants plants, flowers, bees, spiders, me, and more, bring forth a coherent, interconnected reality together.
Thank you so much. I said to Dan, who's here in the room with me, I said, by Jove, I believe she's got it. So just a word to link to our gathering on Friday lab. I sent an email, and I'd like for you to bring with you to our session on Friday a glass of water, a rock, a small container of soil, maybe from your garden, and a plant that seems to reach out to you and want to be to join us in our meditation and our lab experience. So that's a glass of water, a rock, a small container of soil, and a plant that would like to be with us. So let me just tell all of you, thank you for your patience. Thank you for allowing our connections and all of the different aspects of our life together to come through in our gathering. And so let's say goodbye to each other. Can you open up, everybody?
They can do it.
You can open up. You can unmute yourself and say goodbye, and we'll gather again.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Will, I want to tell you how outstanding that lecture was today. Please do have it recorded. It was an outstanding lecture. I appreciate it so much. This is Alice signing off.
All right.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Super, thank
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.